The Golden Gate Bridge had claimed another life that morning, or so everyone thought. Officer Rebecca Stone and her canine partner, Ranger, were called to the scene for what appeared to be a routine suicide response, tragic but unfortunately common. But when Ranger reached the bridge, he refused to leave. For 6 hours the German Shepherd stood at the railing, staring down at the water 200 feet below, barking and whining like he could sense something no human could detect. What search and rescue teams found in the bay would prove that not everyone who goes over that bridge is lost forever. Welcome to Saved by Tales. Before we dive into this incredible story of a canine's refusal to give up hope when everyone else had accepted tragedy, tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed a moment where an animal seemed to sense life when humans saw only death? And if you believe these amazing stories of animal instincts bringing hope to hopeless situations deserve to be shared, hit that subscribe button and join our community celebrating the four-legged heroes who never stop believing in miracles. It was 6:47 a.m. on a foggy November morning when the call came in to the San Francisco Police Department. A witness had seen someone jump from the Golden Gate Bridge, disappearing into the gray waters of the bay below. Officer Rebecca Stone received the dispatch while finishing her night shift patrol, knowing this would likely be her last call before heading home. Stone had responded to bridge calls before. In her 8 years with the SFPD, she'd worked dozens of similar scenes. The Golden Gate Bridge, despite its beauty and iconic status, had a darker reputation as one of the world's most notorious suicide locations. The statistics were grim. Very few people who went over that railing ever survived. Stone's partner, Ranger, was a 7-year-old German Shepherd who specialized in search and rescue operations. He'd found missing hikers in dense fog, located evidence in criminal cases, and assisted in disaster response scenarios. But bridge calls were different from their usual work. Typically, they were there to help secure the scene and assist with witness interviews rather than conduct active searches. Another bridge call, Ranger, Stone said as they drove toward the span. Probably going to be a long morning. The Golden Gate Bridge was shrouded in its typical morning fog when they arrived. The Coast Guard was already on scene, conducting their search pattern in the waters below. Fire department units had secured the bridge deck, and the coroner's office had been notified. Everything was proceeding according to the established protocol for this type of incident. Captain Martinez, the incident commander, briefed Stone when she arrived. Witness saw a male, approximately 30 years old, go over the east side around 6:30 a.m. Coast Guard's been searching for 20 minutes. Water temp is about 52 degrees, so even if someone survived the impact, Stone nodded, understanding the implication. At that water temperature, hypothermia would set in within minutes. The chances of survival were essentially zero. "What do you need from us?" Stone asked. "Standard witness interviews, evidence documentation, scene security," Martinez replied. "The usual." Stone clipped Ranger's leash and began walking toward the area where the witness had seen the person jump. But as they approached the bridge railing, Ranger's behavior became unusual. Instead of staying at Stone's side as trained, he pulled toward the railing and began staring intently down at the water below. "Easy, Ranger," Stone said, tightening his leash. "There's nothing for us to do down there." But Ranger seemed to disagree. He planted his feet at the railing and began a low, steady whine that Stone had never heard before. It wasn't his usual working sound. It was something deeper, more urgent. As the morning progressed, the Coast Guard search continued in the choppy waters below. Their boats moved in careful patterns, using sonar and visual scanning to locate any sign of the victim. Stone conducted her interviews with witnesses and documented the scene as required, but she was increasingly distracted by Ranger's behavior. The dog refused to leave the railing. Even when Stone tried to lead him to other parts of the bridge for their investigation, Ranger would strain back toward that specific spot, whining and occasionally letting out a sharp bark directed at the water below. "Your dog seems really interested in something down there," observed Officer Chen, another responder who had arrived to assist with traffic control. "I've never seen him act like this," Stone admitted. "Usually he's very professional at scenes like this, but he seems agitated." By 10 a.m., the Coast Guard had called off their active search. Captain Roberts, the Marine Unit commander, approached Stone and the other officers on the bridge deck. "We've covered the search area thoroughly," Roberts reported. "Water conditions, temperature, and the fall height make survival extremely unlikely. We're transitioning to a recovery operation." Stone nodded, but Ranger's reaction was immediate and dramatic. The dog began barking loudly and pulling so hard toward the railing that Stone had to brace herself to hold him back. "I honestly don't know," Stone replied. "He's acting like he's tracking something live down there." Martinez looked skeptical. "Officer Stone, I understand that K9 units have exceptional abilities, but we're dealing with a 200-foot fall into frigid water. The laws of physics apply even to search dogs." But Ranger seemed determined to prove physics wrong. He began what Stone could only describe as a protest, barking continuously at the water below, occasionally scratching at the bridge railing as if trying to get down to the bay. Other officers began gathering around, curious about the dog's unusual behavior. Some suggested that Ranger might be reacting to the scent of the victim's clothing or belongings that had been left on the bridge. Others theorized that he was simply responding to the stress and unusual activity of the emergency response, but Stone had worked with Ranger long enough to know his different behavioral patterns. This wasn't stress or confusion. This was his search and rescue mode, the focused intensity he showed when he was tracking someone who needed help. By noon, most of the emergency units had cleared the scene. The witness interviews were complete, the evidence had been documented, and the Coast Guard had officially transitioned to a recovery operation that would continue for several days until a body was found. But Ranger refused to leave. Stone had tried everything, commands, treats, even physically carrying him away from the railing. But the moment she set him down, he would return to his post, staring at the water and maintaining his vigil. "Maybe we should have the vet check him," suggested Sergeant Williams, Stone's supervisor who had come to the scene to check on the situation. "This behavior is pretty unusual." Stone was torn. Ranger appeared to be in perfect health. He was eating, drinking, responding to commands in other contexts. He just wouldn't give up on whatever he was detecting in the water below. "Give me another hour," Stone requested. "If he's still doing this, I'll take him in for an evaluation." Williams nodded reluctantly. "1 hour, but if that dog is having some kind of breakdown, I don't want it affecting his future work." At 1:15 p.m., nearly 7 hours after the initial call, Ranger's behavior suddenly intensified. His barking became more urgent, more directed, and he began pawing frantically at the bridge railing while staring at a specific spot in the water below. Stone followed his gaze and saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Far below, barely visible in the choppy water, was what appeared to be a piece of clothing or debris floating near the shoreline. But as she watched more carefully, the debris seemed to be moving in a way that was inconsistent with the current. Stone grabbed her radio. "Coast Guard, this is SFPD on the bridge deck. I have possible movement in the water, east side, approximately 200 yards from the south tower. Copy, SFPD, we're responding to investigate." Coast Guard Rescue Boat 47, which had been conducting the recovery search pattern, immediately changed course toward the area Stone had indicated. As they approached, their radio crackled with an update that stunned everyone listening. "Bridge Command, this is Rescue 47. We have a survivor in the water. Repeat, we have a live person in the water, requesting immediate medical response." James Morrison, a 34-year-old software engineer, had somehow survived not only the 200-foot fall, but also nearly 7 hours in 52-degree water. When the Coast Guard pulled him from the bay, he was barely conscious and severely hypothermic, but alive. "It's medically impossible," said Dr. Sarah Chen, the emergency physician who treated Morrison at San Francisco General Hospital. "The combination of impact trauma and hypothermia should have been fatal within minutes. I've never seen anything like it." Morrison had managed to survive by finding a piece of debris, part of an old pier that had broken away during a storm weeks earlier. The debris had provided just enough buoyancy to keep him partially out of the water, and its position near the shoreline had protected him from the worst of the current. But even with that stroke of luck, his survival defied medical probability. His core body temperature had dropped to levels that should have caused cardiac arrest, and he'd sustained multiple injuries from the fall that should have prevented him from staying afloat. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a veterinary behaviorist who studied animal sensory capabilities, was brought in to analyze how Ranger had detected Morrison's presence when human responders had missed it. "Dogs can detect life signs that are imperceptible to humans," Dr. Walsh explained. Ranger was likely responding to Morrison's breathing, his heartbeat, possibly even his body heat signature reflecting off the water surface. But Morrison was nearly 200 feet away and barely conscious, Stone pointed out. "German Shepherds have hearing that's roughly 4 times more sensitive than human hearing," Dr. Walsh replied. "They can also detect infrared radiation and chemical signatures that we can't perceive." Ranger was essentially using a combination of senses to track a living person that human technology had missed. The case became a subject of study for both search and rescue operations and medical survival research. Morrison spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from hypothermia, multiple fractures, and internal injuries. During his recovery, he requested to meet the dog who had refused to give up on him. "I remember hearing barking," Morrison said during their meeting at the hospital. "Even when I was barely conscious, floating in that water, I could hear a dog barking above me. It gave me something to focus on, something to fight for." Stone brought Ranger to visit Morrison several times during his recovery. The dog seemed to understand the significance of their connection, sitting calmly beside Morrison's bed and accepting gentle pets from the man whose life he had helped save. Morrison's family was overwhelmed by gratitude. "We were preparing for a funeral," his sister Michelle said through tears. "Instead, we're planning a homecoming. That dog didn't just find my brother, he refused to let us lose hope." The incident prompted a review of suicide response protocols on the Golden Gate Bridge. Morrison's survival, while miraculous, raised questions about how thoroughly search operations were conducted and how long they should continue. Ranger's persistence saved a life, said Coast Guard Captain Roberts. It also taught us that our assumptions about survivability might need to be reconsidered. We're implementing new protocols that extend search times and include canine assistance in water rescue operations. Morrison himself struggled with the psychological aftermath of his suicide attempt and the miraculous rescue. He entered intensive therapy and became an advocate for mental health awareness and suicide prevention. "I thought I wanted to die that morning," Morrison said at a bridge safety forum months later. "But lying in that water, hearing that dog barking for me, I realized I wanted to live." Sometimes you need someone else to believe in your life when you can't believe in it yourself. Ranger received national recognition for his role in Morrison's rescue. He was awarded the American Humane Hero Dog Award and received commendations from search and rescue organizations across the country. But the recognition Stone treasured most came from Morrison himself. 6 months after his rescue, Morrison had recovered enough to return to work and rebuild his life. He visited Stone and Ranger regularly, crediting the dog with not just saving his life, but inspiring his recovery. "Ranger taught me about persistence," Morrison said. "Even when everyone else had given up, he didn't. That's how I approach my mental health now. I don't give up, even when it seems hopeless." The Morrison rescue led to significant changes in how emergency services approached water rescue operations. Canine units became a standard part of the response protocol for bridge incidents, and search times were extended based on the possibility that victims might survive longer than previously thought possible. Ranger's case showed us that survival is sometimes possible in conditions we thought were unsurvivable, explained Dr. Robert Kim, who developed new hypothermia survival protocols based on Morrison's case. "We're now training first responders to continue searches longer and to trust animal senses when they indicate life signs." The Golden Gate Bridge also implemented new safety measures, including additional crisis counselors and expanded mental health resources for people in crisis. 3 years after Morrison's rescue, Stone and Ranger continued their work with enhanced respect for the dog's ability to detect life in seemingly hopeless situations. Their partnership had saved several more lives, always guided by the lesson learned that November morning, that hope should never be abandoned, as long as someone is still fighting for it. "Ranger changed how I approach every call," Stone reflected. "He taught me that miracles are possible, but sometimes they need someone who refuses to stop believing in them." Morrison became a close friend of Stone's family and remained active in suicide prevention advocacy. He often spoke about how a dog's refusal to give up had literally saved his life and inspired his ongoing recovery. Morrison's survival story became a beacon of hope for families dealing with suicide and mental health crises. His case was studied by medical professionals trying to understand the limits of human survival, and by animal behaviorists studying the incredible sensory capabilities of working dogs. Ranger's story reminds us that hope can come from unexpected sources, said Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, director of a suicide prevention organization. "Sometimes the voice that calls us back to life doesn't speak in words, it barks." The partnership between Stone and Ranger continued to inspire search and rescue operations nationwide, always guided by the principle that every life is worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds might seem. I still think about that foggy November morning, when everyone had accepted that another life was lost to the Golden Gate Bridge, and one German Shepherd refused to accept that conclusion. If Stone had forced Ranger to leave the scene, if she'd dismissed his persistent barking as confusion or stress, James Morrison would have died alone in the water while rescue teams searched elsewhere. Ranger's story teaches us something profound about hope and persistence. Where humans saw tragedy and impossibility, he sensed life and possibility. His refusal to give up when everyone else had accepted defeat didn't just save one man's life, it changed how we think about survival, rescue operations, and the power of never abandoning hope. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed a moment where an animal seemed to sense hope in a hopeless situation, when their persistence or unusual behavior led to an important discovery that humans had missed? These instincts might be more crucial than we realize, especially in life and death situations where giving up too early can mean the difference between tragedy and miracle. Share your experiences in the comments below, because at Saved by Tales, we believe that sometimes the most important voices are the ones that refuse to be quiet when everyone else has stopped calling. If Ranger's incredible story moved you, if it reminded you that miracles are possible when someone refuses to stop believing in them, please share this video with others who might need that message of hope. Hit that like button, subscribe to Saved by Tales, and help us continue telling the stories of animals whose persistence turns tragedy into triumph and despair into hope. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the difference between life and death is having someone who refuses to give up, even when everyone else has stopped believing in miracles.